I'm Iain Curry, this is Chasing Cars, and take a look at this. Isuzu has finally delivered a proper hardcore off-road dual cab ute. Known as the D-Max Blade, it is a response to its key rivals which offer a more off-road specific package which Australians are absolutely fallen in love with.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
See it as a rival to the Toyota Hilux GR Sport and Rogue, the Ford Ranger Tremor, and the Nissan Navara Pro 4X Warrior. It's also priced in a similar ballpark to those cars. Isuzu's offering these for $76,990 drive away. And it's absolutely not a half measure this. This is a proper re-engineered vehicle here in Australia by Australians. Isuzu has got Walkinshaw Automotive involved, and of course with their track record, all the different utes they've been able to do, as well as the performance vehicles, they probably couldn't have picked a better company to get involved with. All right, let's have a look around some of the key updates for this new vehicle. The vehicle's based on the D-Max LSU Plus, so it's already quite luxuriously appointed inside. But if you are hoping for any extra engine performance, that's not something that's been delivered to this car. So it retains Isuzu's 3-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel with 140 kilowatts and 450 Newton meters. So unlike something like the Hilux GR Sport, they haven't found those few extra kilowatts and Newton meters, the sort of stuff that maybe doesn't make a huge difference in the real world or off-roading, but it's the sort of thing that a lot of new buyers do appreciate. Having got familiar with the vehicle now, I must say it is a pretty good looking, tough dual cab ute. Some of the changes involve new decals, of course they were going to arrive, but more significantly, this grille is all new. That's a bit meatier and tougher. And if you look underneath, that is one serious bash plate. That's 3mm steel, and I really like how they've painted it red and given it the huge Isuzu branding through it. Also, recovery points either side, they're good enough to handle 8 tons. Raised suspension, as you'd expect, although it's only 29mm. But the wheel and tyre package, for me aesthetically, this makes a huge difference. These are 17-inch rims, so the normal LSU Plus, that has 18, so they've gone smaller, but they are an inch wider, which means when you fit these Goodyear Wrangler off-road rubber, this is proper all-terrain rubber, it's a much chunkier, bigger tyre, so it really helps with the stance of this thing. And also to accommodate those, they've had to extend these wheel guards as well. So overall, when you look at it, it does look a bit meaner, fatter, tougher, really nice stance on this vehicle. Also included are these proper hardcore chassis mount side steps as well. Importantly for your off-road work, ground clearance is now 244mm. That's helped by the suspension lift and the bigger tyres. Round the back, you've got these giant sports bar as well, and this giant blade decal. You know, I think I like it. It certainly adds a bit of toughness. I've seen it on a white car as well, and it probably looks a bit better on that. Otherwise, it's standard D-Max fare, still 3.5 ton tow rating, and in the tub you have a payload of 894 kilograms. The Blade doesn't bring a huge amount of difference to the interior. It's still Isuzu's rugged utilitarian feel. Stuff like your door tops are still pretty solid as it is through the middle. The seats themselves, they're from the LSU Plus, so they're pretty well appointed. It's faux leather with Blade embroidery through them. That's really your only measure. Otherwise, it's pretty black in here, pretty austere, but a good usable cabin. It really does feel like it's well screwed together and built tough. No changes either for the entertainment. It's a 9-inch screen, wireless Apple CarPlay and wired, and wireless Android Auto and wired as well, and a 7-inch digital driver's display as well, amongst your normal sort of dials. One thing I've really noticed when we were doing the hardcore off-roading that I've missed is a huge amount of camera systems, stuff like you'd get in the higher end Ford Rangers and some of the new Chinese utes as well, is the cameras that would show you forward vision, what's underneath as well. So that's really missing from this vehicle for the hardcore off-roaders. Nothing too much to report in the rear seat either that would be different, although I must say these seats from the LSU Plus now into this Blade, they're pretty comfy things for riding in the back if you have got the back seat passengers. Vents, of course, a single USB-A port. But I want to show you this quickly. This is pretty cool in the D-Max. You lift the seat base up and this one comes up as well, so you can lay some pretty big bags, suitcases even in, without risk of damaging your leather on top of the seats. Also, this portion just comes up. That's really handy storage there to put the likes of your tow bar, recovery gear, anything you want to secret away as well, maybe for security. Now, fair play to Isuzu. When they develop an off-road hardcore D-Max, this Blade, they aren't afraid to let us loose in some pretty extreme places. They've taken us to an off-road park in the Adelaide Hills in South Australia, and we are doing some proper gnarly climbs and hits and bumps and rocks. And what can I tell you? Well, it's got a 32mm wider track than a normal D-Max. Now that helps with things like steering feel and handling control and feel as well. And I'm just forever amazed at how competent these cars are. And if I just get a bit of throttle, the suspension travel is absolutely incredible. I thought we were going to absolutely clunk down into a giant hole there, but not a sound from underneath. It really is magnificently capable, this thing. If you're into your serious off-roading, out of the box, I reckon you're going to be able to take this thing to some pretty far-reaching hardcore areas. It's exactly what Isuzu owners and fans have been calling out for so many years, and it's so good that Walkinshaw has got involved, because you know they are not going to mess around. They've got so much previous in this area, not just off-roaders, but of course HSV performance cars, all the right-hand drive conversions, so you know you're dealing with a very professional company. And doing it here in Australia, of course, it means they know exactly the conditions that we have here, exactly how these cars are going to be used. So it really is a win-win for both Walkinshaw and Isuzu. It's been developed really, really well, as far as I can tell from this first sample off-road. Helping things along and carried over from other D-Maxes is a rough terrain mode and of course your locking rear differential. It's a really smart system. We've been properly articulated. We've had wheels up in the air, and I must say, as soon as you turn those systems on, it has no dramas at all. If you just feed in a bit of power, getting the grip, finding traction somehow when you think it's going to be impossible. It's a normal D-Max is certainly very capable, but of course there are those that need this sort of extra level, and it saves you going to the aftermarket. I think that's key. You're going to get this right out of the box as Isuzu and Walkinshaw has developed them. Although I criticise no additional power and torque for this Blade, our off-road trip hasn't really seen us wanting for any extra, if I'm honest, and I think that's quite pertinent. It's by no means the most powerful dual cab ute that you can buy, but it's not the weakest either, and it's a pretty tough engine. It's a large one as well, being 3 litres, and I think a lot of people swear by that. And that 450 newton meters of torque, that has had no dramas pulling us out of some pretty sticky spots as well. So overall, it's hard to fault. While this new Blade has certainly been enhanced off-road, of course it's still going to spend the majority of its time for the majority of owners on-road. The D-Max, of course, was our 3rd best selling car in Australia overall, behind only the Hilux and the Ranger last year. So of course it's going to be seeing a lot of work on the bitumen. And what am I finding here on our pretty standard, fair, choppy South Australian road? Well, I wasn't say I was expecting miracles in terms of ride quality and response, and we haven't really got it here. It still feels and drives very much like a ute. The only thing I can maybe look to when it comes to a ute that really has surpassed the drive experience we expect is the Ford Ranger Raptor, which is just in a different stratosphere of ride quality, but also of complexity of its suspension system. This new Blade, it has exactly the same spring rates as the normal D-Max. To actually change that, we're told by Walkinshaw, would have been incredibly expensive and a long time to develop. These D-Maxes, of course, still have leaf sprung rears, so to actually change anything significantly would have been too hard. It's a different matter when it comes to the shock absorbers. Walkinshaw's worked with Munro to develop the setup here, and they have gone through exhaustive testing over 100,000 kilometers out in the Aussie bush and around Lang Lang test track. Even though we're told it doesn't make a great deal of difference on the road, as we're finding, it's when you're out in the bush, maybe doing some high speed stuff, that's when you're going to really feel the difference with some incredible damping. Whereas on the road here, I'm still feeling it's quite a choppy ride with no weight in the back at all. A difference I have picked up is slightly better steering response. Again, you can't be expecting miracles. It's still a dual cab ute that'll tow 3.5 ton, and the payload isn't compromised either with keeping the spring setup the same. But yes, certainly it feels like there's slightly better turning, marginally better handling, but again, we're dealing with very small segments here that maybe chassis developers are going to pick up, but the general ute driver isn't going to really notice much difference at all in this car. That's not to say it's not a good thing. The D-Max is reasonably good on road. It's a pretty solid all-round package in terms of ride quality, fair handling, and the engine as well. It's like a trusted old mate. That big displacement 3 litre has 140 kilowatts and 450 newton meters of torque. It's a reliable big jigger. You'll feel most benefit when you're off-roading with this damping system. They're 35mm Monroe twin tube dampers, and they're just slightly more robust for when you're off-roading. They're not gonna get as hot, so the durability will be a lot better. They're more able to cope with some of the bigger bumps you might experience out in the bush. The slightly wider track of this Blade should in theory improve the handling as well. We haven't had the full opportunity to test this car properly. I really want to live with it for a week to see how well it's composed in that regard. One thing I have noticed is these tyres, the all-terrain rubber. It's the first time the D-Max has had all-terrain rubber fitted as standard, and I know they're pretty stiff sidewalls on these things, and it'll be again interesting to see how they'd fare in the wet weather. We're promised that for an all-terrain tyre they're pretty good in the wet, but again, that's something buyers should be conscious of if they're picking up the Blade, that they're not going to be as reliable or good in treacherous on-road conditions. If I just do a quick cornering test here, and it's not horrendous. The stability control kicked in a little bit to help us through the turn, but compared to some other utes, especially the larger ones, it's not too bad. And I must say, as we build up a bit of speed, I've found the cornering and the handling, it does seem to improve a little bit at speed. And again, maybe there is just a little bit more feel in that steering, so it's worthwhile. The rest is as you were D-Max. 8.3 litres per 100 kilometre is pretty much par for the course. And the driver aids as well. When this D-Max was facelifted in May 2024, it did bring improvements to the driver aids, and that included the lane keep assist. It used to be pogoing you across the road quite a bit. Now it massages you back into lane quite easily. So that's certainly an improvement for anyone that is in a pre-2024 D-Max. The all-terrain tyres as well, I haven't noticed too much tyre noise from them. That can be a common complaint, but maybe that's because the wind noise from the wing mirrors actually overtake that. My final takeaway would be there's a danger when you're going for a really hardcore off-road upgrade to these utes that it really will compromise its on-road performance, but that's definitely not the case here. I wouldn't say there's any giant leap when it comes to on-road enjoyment and compliance, but there's certainly no downgrade either. So very much a worthwhile improvement. And for those considering this vehicle for primarily on-road use, you won't be disappointed. It's standard fare ute with no obvious compromise. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it, a proper off-road D-Max? But I must say the early signs are very positive on this thing. It really does handle the rough stuff exceptionally well. That's what a lot of D-Max owners will really be after. So I think they have read the market well. And getting Walkinshaw involved, that is a huge credit to Isuzu. They probably couldn't have picked a better development partner. 76,990 drive away. The price seems about par for the market, so that's probably going to work. I suppose the only real disappointment for some people will be no change to that engine, kilowatts and newton meters. I'd really love to know your thoughts on the new D-Max Blade. Please leave your comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as ever, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.